Hey there, it's that time of year. We're opening up the pool and I've got to clean out our salt chlorine generator. I forgot to do it last year. I've got some buildup inside of it. I'm gonna go ahead and take the time to show you how I clean this out, get rid of that scaling, get this ready for use, and these tips can be applied to many other types of salt cells. So stick with me. So our salt cell is a Pentair IC40. This handles up to 40,000 gallons. And again, these steps can be used for many other types of salt cells, including different sized Pentair products or even other branded salt cells. They're all pretty similar in how they work. We've got these fins inside of here that are producing the chlorine from the salt. So water is flowing through the salt cell from this end and exiting on this end. And on our particular unit, we've got this little grid here that we can remove. And as we look along those fins, we can see that white buildup along the edges, especially on the inlet side. We've got quite a bit of it. And so what that does is that's gonna prevent this from working as efficiently because you don't have as much contact area with the metal that produces the chlorine. So once you start seeing that scaling, it usually means it's a good time to go ahead and give it a good cleaning. And here are the materials I'm going to be using to clean out my salt cell. The big thing here is I am using muriatic acid. So we need an acid that's going to dissolve away that salt buildup. And because we're using acid, it's very important to take safety precautions. I'll be using some nitrile gloves and some safety goggles. And I've got 2 containers to help me measure out the acid, along with some water that I'll be using to dilute the acid. And then lastly, this may be optional depending on the type of salt cell you have, but this is from Pentair. It's a cap. That way I'm able to pour my cleaning solution in one end of this without it flowing out the other end. So the first thing I'm gonna do is get my cap installed. That way I can hold the cleaning solution in my salt cell. And so this fits up nicely. We can see we've got a solid backing. And I'm just gonna go ahead and thread this in place. And one thing to note is I am putting the cap on the opposite side of my flow sensor, because what's gonna happen is we're gonna stand this upright, pour our cleaning solution in, and we wanna make sure that we minimize the amount of contact of our acid solution with our flow sensor there, which will help prevent premature failure and corrosion. And so for our cleaning solution, we're going to be using a ratio of 4 parts water to 1 part muriatic acid. And for reference, this is 31.45%, fairly common in a lot of hardware stores. If you have a different concentration, you may want to consider changing that dilution ratio, but I'm using 4:1 for a 31.45%. So with my acid solution, I'm going to make sure I have water in my bucket first, and then I'm going to go ahead and add the acid. It's important to always add acid to water and not the other way around. And so with my 4:1 mixture, I'm going to add 2 of these full of water, and then I will add a half of one with acid to get the proper ratio. All right, now that we're gonna be working with the acid, putting on my safety goggles, got my gloves on, now we're ready to pour our acid into the water. And it is imperative to follow all the safety instructions when using muriatic acid. It can definitely be a hazard if it's in contact with you. You don't want to be breathing in the vapors as you're pouring it, and it can cause damage to surfaces, clothing, so take all the appropriate precautions. And I always have muriatic acid on hand because I use this to lower the pH in my pool. It's actually labeled on there as an application, so it's a lot cheaper than the pool store pH reducer. Just get some muriatic acid. So I will be filling up our container to the halfway point. Obviously be very careful as pouring this. You don't want to get any splashing on yourself. I'm wearing short sleeves, but long sleeves probably would have been better. All right, I've got my acid in here. Go ahead, carefully dump it into our bucket. All right, so I spilled a little acid. I'm just gonna take some water. This is on concrete, so definitely when you're doing this, make sure you're in a spot where if you do have any spillage, it's not gonna be a huge concern. All right, so at this point I have my salt cell stood upright. The cap is on the bottom, flow sensor is on the top. I'm gonna go ahead and carefully pour our solution in here. And I've kind of positioned this in a way where it hopefully won't topple over. I've got it supported on 3 sides. Probably a step, if you have a funnel, you could use that to help direct it. And as I'm pouring, I'm gonna try to avoid the flow sensor as much as I can, but it's really gonna be inevitable that some of the solution's gonna go on there. We'll just continue filling this up until we get to above that scaling on the fins. We can see all the bubbling action going on there. That's indicating that the acid is eating away at the salt. And I think we can even see some of that salt kind of rising to the surface there a little bit. We're gonna let this sit for probably not more than 15 minutes or when the bubbles stop. One thing to note, this cap is holding nicely. It's only been a couple minutes and the bubbling is actually starting to slow down already, but I am going to keep this in there just for at least a couple more minutes. I'll take a look at it, see if the scaling's gone, and if needed, we can always repeat it. And just real quick, while we're waiting for the muriatic acid to work its magic on our salt cell, please consider hitting that subscribe button if you want to see more tips and tricks around the pool and around the house. All right, the bubble action has completely stopped. It has been about 10 minutes, so I'm gonna go ahead and dump this out and we'll take a look to see how those fins on our cell look. I'm just gonna actually pour this back into our original bucket that still has quite a bit of solution left. We can see it is looking good on this end. So based on the inspection from this side, I've still got my cap on. I'm gonna go ahead and now just fill this with some fresh water, rinse off any residual acid so that we're not continuing to eat away at any surfaces in there. So after we're done with the acid solution, there's a few ways to dispose of this. One, you could add some baking soda in here just to neutralize it, get rid of the acid effects. But in reality, I plan to lower the pH in my pool anyways, and that's what muriatic acid does. So we're just gonna go ahead and toss it in there. It'll actually help our pool as we continue to get the balance in order. I've got some fresh tap water that I'm just gonna go ahead and pour into our salt cell. I'll let it sit for a couple minutes. This will just kind of help remove any residual acid. And for this rinse, I am going above the flow sensor so that we can get any acid that may have accidentally splashed onto it off of there. After a couple minutes, I go ahead, dump the water out, and then I refill it once more and do the same thing. All right, we can see how this looks now. I'm gonna go ahead and take off our cap. You can see all the salt buildup is gone, and we are ready to put this back into action as we kick off our pool season. Also gonna go ahead and throw our little grid back in here. Now we're gonna go ahead and get this installed back into line here. It's also a good time to lube up your O-rings on these unions. So just make sure we've got the flow going in the proper direction. Here's from the filter through the salt cell back to the pool. Then we've got our plug that just goes to our power center for our salt cell. I'm gonna go ahead and get this put in there. Just make sure you line up those pins in the proper orientation. It's pretty much keyed up, so there's only really one way that you want to connect it. All right, we're ready now with our salt cell. So there we have it, how to get the salt cell cleaned up, ready for action. And if you found this video useful, I would appreciate you hitting that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.